Why avoidants always seem to go back to anxious exes? Let me ask you a question. Why do some people always seem to end up in the same painful cycle over and over again? Because, my friends, human beings are not wired for logic. We're wired for patterns. Most people go through life thinking that their relationships are just the result of luck, timing, or finding the right person. But the truth is, your relationships are a direct reflection of your pattern. And until you become aware of those patterns, you'll keep repeating them over and over again, wondering why the same issues keep showing up in your love life. It's like driving the same road every day and wondering why you always end up at the same destination. The reason you're experiencing the same relationship dynamics isn't random. It's programmed into your nervous system. Your brain is wired to seek familiarity, even if that familiarity is painful. See, most people don't choose love based on what's healthy. They choose it based on what's familiar. If you grew up in an environment where love felt inconsistent, unpredictable, or unavailable, that becomes your blueprint for relationships. It doesn't matter how badly you want security, peace, or unconditional love. If your subconscious mind is wired for inconsistency, you will be drawn to relationships that match that emotional state. This is exactly why avoidance and anxious partners keep finding each other. They are unconsciously repeating childhood patterns. The anxious partner is replaying their fear of abandonment, chasing after love to prove their worth. The avoidant partner is recreating their fear of losing independence, running away when things get too close. And because these two attachment styles are opposite but deeply connected, they create an emotional loop that feels impossible to break. The cycle goes like this. The anxious partner feels neglected or ignored, so they push for connection. The avoidant partner feels overwhelmed by the pressure, so they pull away. The anxious partner panics, reaches out, and tries to fix things. The avoidant partner distances even more. Eventually, the avoidant starts to miss their ex, not because they want true intimacy, but because they crave the chase and retreat dynamic that feels normal to them. So they come back and the cycle starts again. This isn't just about relationships, it's about your entire life. Most people don't realize that their brain is running on outdated programming, shaping their decisions, their emotions, and their experiences, and because they aren't aware of it, they keep getting the same results. They wonder why they attract emotionally unavailable partners. They question why every relationship ends the same way. They think love is just hard, when really it's their patterns that make it feel that way. You can't break a pattern you don't even know exists. This is why self-awareness is the first step. You have to take a hard look at your past relationships and ask yourself, what emotional patterns keep showing up? Do I feel a sense of anxiety or fear when love is uncertain? Do I feel relief when I distance myself from emotional intent? Do I only feel safe in relationships that have a push-pull dynamic? Your answers will reveal the blueprint you've been operating from. And once you see the pattern, you can finally change it. Because when you bring awareness to a problem, you take away its power over you. But here's the thing, awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing your pattern won't break it. Action will. You have to consciously start making different choices, even when they feel uncomfortable. If you're anxious, that means learning to self-soothe instead of seeking validation from your partner. If you're avoidant, that means practicing emotional intimacy instead of withdrawing. You have to rewire your nervous system to experience love in a new way, one that isn't based on survival but on real connection. The truth is, love isn't meant to feel like a roller coaster. It's not supposed to be a constant chase, an endless cycle of anxiety and avoidance. Real love feels secure, it feels steady, it feels safe, but you'll never find that kind of love if you keep running on autopilot, following the same old patterns. If you want a different result in your relationships, you have to become aware of the road you've been driving on, and then have the courage to take a new path. Because once you wake up to your patterns, you can finally break free from them. And that's when everything changes. There's a reason why avoidance and anxious partners keep finding each other, and it's not random, it's not fate, and it's not because they're meant to be. It's because they're locked in a subconscious pattern that pulls them together like magnets, even when it causes pain. Let's break this down. Imagine you're walking into a room filled with 100 people. Logically, you'd think you have an equal chance of connecting with anyone in that room. But in reality, your subconscious mind is scanning, analyzing, and filtering through all those people in a matter of seconds until it locks onto someone whose energy feels familiar. And what does familiar mean? It means the type of emotional experience your nervous system is used to. It means the same kind of love dynamic you grew up with. If love felt inconsistent, unpredictable, or full of highs and lows in your early years, that's what your subconscious is drawn to. This is why over and over again, anxious and avoidant partners end up together. The anxious person craves love, attention, and reassurance. Their deepest fear is abandonment, so they seek closeness at all costs. When their partner pulls away, they panic. They start texting more, overanalyzing, trying to fix the relationship, and proving their worth. They believe that if they can just be enough, they'll finally feel safe. Now, let's look at the avoidant. The avoidant person values independence above all else. Deep down, found they crave love too, but love to them feels like a loss of freedom. The closer someone gets, the more they feel trapped, smothered, and overwhelmed. So when their anxious partner starts pushing for more connection, they instinctively withdraw. They need space, they pull back, delay responses, or focus on work, hobbies, or distractions to create distance. And guess what happens next? The anxious partner senses that distance and panics. They chase harder, they send long texts, they overgive. The avoidant, feeling pressured, retreats even further. This creates a cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, connection and disconnection, love and fear. And here's the most powerful part. Neither the anxious nor the avoidant knows they're doing this. They're just following the emotional blueprint that's been running in the background for years, maybe even decades. The brain loves what's familiar. Even if it's painful, even if it's unhealthy, if it feels familiar, it feels safe. This is why anxious and avoidant people keep repeating the same pattern. It's not because they're doomed, it's because they're running a program that hasn't been updated. Now, let's take it a step further. Why do avoidants so often go back to their anxious exes? Because the push-pull dynamic is their comfort zone. When an avoidant finally ends a relationship, they feel relief at first. They think, finally, I have my space back, no more pressure, no more expectations. But then something strange happens. After a while, they start missing their ex. They start wondering if they made the right choice. They remember the affection, the attention, the deep emotional connection their anxious partner gave them. And suddenly that space they once craved starts to feel like emptiness. It's not that they've changed. It's not that they're suddenly ready for deep emotional intimacy. It's that their nervous system is craving the push-pull cycle again. They miss the chase. They miss the feeling of being desired. They miss the emotional highs that came with the relationship. So they reach out. They reconnect. They test the waters. And when their ex responds with excitement and relief, the avoidant feels good, they feel powerful, they feel wanted again. But then like clockwork, as soon as the anxious partner starts leaning in, the avoidant starts pulling back, starting the whole cycle over again. This is why so many people get stuck in toxic on-again, off-again relationships. They think it's because they have some unbreakable connection with their ex, but really it's just an unhealed attachment pattern playing out in real time. And listen, there's nothing wrong with being anxious or avoidant. It's not about blame, it's about awareness. When you understand your patterns, you have the power to change them. You stop chasing people who are emotionally unavailable. You stop running from love that feels too close. You stop mistaking chaos for passion and realize that real love isn't a roller coaster, it's a steady, secure foundation. And that, my friends, is when everything shifts. Because when you change your patterns, you change your relationships. And when you change your relationships, you change your life. Avoidants are often misunderstood. People assume they don't want love, that they're cold, distant, or incapable of deep emotional connection. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Avoidants want love just as much as anyone else. The difference is how they experience it. For an avoidant, closeness feels like a threat to their independence. They've learned, somewhere along the way, that emotional intimacy comes with strings attached. Maybe they grew up in a household where love was conditional, where they only felt valued when they were achieving or performing. Maybe they had caregivers who were intrusive, who didn't respect their boundaries, who made them feel like they had to earn affection. Or maybe they experienced rejection early in life, so they built walls to protect themselves. Whatever the case, avoidants develop a belief that relationships mean losing themselves. They associate closeness with pressure, obligation, or even control. So when someone, especially an anxious partner, leans in and wants more connection, the avoidant instinctively pulls back, not because they don't care, but because their nervous system is wired to equate intimacy with suffocation. Now here's the kicker. Avoidants crave connection just like everyone else. The difference is that they don't know how to experience it in a healthy way. Their strategy for maintaining relationships is to create distance. It sounds contradictory, but in their mind, it makes perfect sense. If they can keep a relationship at arm's length, they get the best of both worlds. They get the comfort of connection without the fear of losing their autonomy. This is why avoidants tend to be drawn back to their anxious exes. They may leave, feeling the need to escape the emotional intensity of the relationship, but after some time apart, the fear of being overwhelmed fades, and what's left is the deep longing for the connection they once had. They begin to remember the love, the admiration, the way their partner made them feel needed, and in that moment, they reach out. But here's the painful part. The cycle repeats itself, because as soon as their ex welcomes them back and starts getting close again, the old fears resurface. The avoidance starts to feel trapped. They begin focusing on their partner's flaws, magnifying small issues to justify pulling away. They tell themselves they're not ready or that their ex is too much. And just like that, the distance returns and the pattern continues. The reason this cycle is so powerful is that it's not a conscious choice. Avoidants don't wake up thinking, how can I sabotage my relationship today? They're just running an emotional program that's been operating in the background for years. Their nervous system is designed to keep them safe from the pain of enmeshment, so they repeat the same behaviors until they become aware of them. And that's the key, awareness. Once an avoidant understands that their craving for connection is real, but their fear of closeness is sabotaging it, they can start to break the cycle. They can begin to challenge their old beliefs and rewrite their emotional blueprint. Instead of automatically retreating when a partner gets close, they can pause and ask, am I pulling away because I actually want to or because I'm afraid? They can start leaning into connection instead of avoiding it. For anxious partners, this awareness is just as crucial. It's easy to take an avoidance distancing personally, to believe that if you were better or less needy, they wouldn't pull away. But that's not the case. Avoidants don't withdraw because you're not enough. They withdraw because closeness feels overwhelming to them. And when you understand that, you stop trying to chase them back. You stop seeing their withdrawal as a reflection of your worth, and you start realizing it's a reflection of their unresolved fears. When avoidance and anxious partners break this cycle, everything shifts. The anxious partner learns to self-soothe, to stop seeking constant reassurance, and to build security within themselves. The avoidant partner learns to communicate their fears, to lean into intimacy, and to see closeness as a source of strength rather than a loss of freedom. And that's when real, healthy love becomes possible, not a love based on fear, chasing, or running, but a love built on true emotional security. The nervous system is one of the most powerful forces driving human behavior, especially in relationships. People think they make decisions logically, but the truth is most of what they do is dictated by deep unconscious patterns wired into their nervous system. This is why avoidance and anxious partners keep finding themselves drawn back into relationships that don't serve them, not because they want to repeat the cycle, but because their nervous system is wired to seek what feels familiar. For an anxious partner, love has often been linked to fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of losing the connection they crave. Maybe they grew up in an environment where affection was unpredictable, where love was available one moment and withdrawn the next. Over time, their nervous system learned to stay on high alert, scanning for any signs of disconnection. They learned that they had to work for love, to prove their worth, to earn affection. This creates a chronic state of anxiety in relationships. The anxious partner becomes hyper-focused on their partner's mood, tone, and actions. If their partner withdraws even slightly, their nervous system reacts as if it's a life or death situation. Their body floods with stress hormones, their mind races with worst-case scenarios, and they feel an overwhelming urge to fix, chase, or overextend to regain the connection. This isn't a conscious choice, it's a nervous system response. Now, let's look at the avoidant partner. Their nervous system learned a completely different survival strategy. Instead of fearing abandonment, they fear losing their independence. Maybe they grew up in a home where emotions felt overwhelming or where their boundaries weren't respected. Maybe they were expected to be strong or self-sufficient at a young age. Their nervous system adapted by teaching them that closeness equals danger, that relationships mean giving up their personal space and freedom. So when they feel their partner pulling them closer, their body reacts as if they're under threat. Their heart rate increases, their mind starts justifying why they need to leave, and their instinct is to create space, fast. Again, this isn't a conscious decision. It's their nervous system protecting them from what it perceives as suffocation. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the anxious and avoidant nervous systems are operating on opposite fears, they create a powerful subconscious loop that neither person realizes they're stuck in. When an avoidant pulls away, the anxious partner's nervous system panics and chases harder. This triggers the avoidance nervous system to feel overwhelmed, so they retreat even further. The anxious partner, now feeling the distance, tries even harder to reconnect. And the cycle continues, but here's what most people don't realize. The avoidant is just as emotionally hooked as the anxious partner. They just express it differently. While the anxious person seeks closeness to soothe their nervous system, the avoidant uses distance to regulate theirs. But both are reacting to the same core fear, insecurity, and love. And this is exactly why avoidants go back to their anxious exes. When they leave, their nervous system initially feels relieved because the pressure of the relationship is gone. They get space, they feel independent, and their stress levels drop. But after some time, something shifts. The absence of their ex creates an emotional void. Their nervous system, which was once dysregulated by closeness, now becomes dysregulated by loneliness. This is when the avoidant starts reminiscing. They remember the warmth, the affection, the way their ex made them feel wanted. Their nervous system, which once craved space, now craves connection. And because the anxious partner is usually still emotionally attached, the avoidant knows they can go back and reignite the dynamic. But as soon as they do, as soon as they get close again, the old fear resurfaces. The nervous system kicks into fight or flight mode, and suddenly they're overwhelmed again. The very connection they sought now feels like a threat. So they withdraw, and the whole pattern plays out once more. This isn't about love or destiny. It's about neurobiology. It's about emotional conditioning. And it's why so many people stay stuck in unhealthy relationships, not because they're meant to be together, but because their nervous systems are addicted to the cycle. The only way to break free is to become aware of these patterns and retrain the nervous system to experience love differently. The anxious partner must learn to regulate their emotions without seeking constant reassurance. They must teach their nervous system that safety doesn't come from chasing, but from within. The avoidant must learn to sit with emotional closeness without running. They must practice leaning in when their instinct is to withdraw. When both partners begin to rewire their responses, the cycle no longer has power over them. Love stops feeling like a roller coaster, and real, secure connection becomes possible. Avoidants often believe that their independence is their greatest strength. They pride themselves on being self-sufficient, on not needing anyone, on handling life on their own terms. They see relationships as something that could potentially trap them, limit their freedom, or force them into emotional territory that feels overwhelming. But here's the thing. The belief that they don't need love is an illusion. It's not that they don't need connection, it's that they've trained themselves to avoid needing it. This belief is rooted in early experiences. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotional expression was discouraged, where vulnerability was seen as weakness, or where their emotional needs weren't consistently met. Maybe they had caregivers who were distant or dismissive, who taught them, either directly or indirectly, that relying on others was unsafe. Or maybe they had parents who were overly intrusive, making them feel suffocated, controlled, or like they had no personal space. In response, they developed a powerful defense mechanism. They convinced themselves that they didn't need deep emotional connection, that needing someone meant losing themselves, that being vulnerable meant giving up control. Over time, this became their default way of relating to others. When things get emotionally intense, their nervous system signals danger, and their first instinct is to pull away, rationalizing their withdrawal as a need for space or time to think. But despite their efforts to detach, the need for connection doesn't disappear. It's biological. Humans are wired for attachment, and no matter how much an avoidant tries to suppress it, their nervous system still craves closeness. It just doesn't know how to handle it. This is why avoidants find themselves coming back to their anxious exes. When they initially leave a relationship, they feel a sense of relief. The pressure is gone, they have their space back, their nervous system calms down because they're no longer feeling the intensity of emotional closeness. For a while, it feels good. They focus on work, hobbies, or personal goals, reassuring themselves that they're better off alone, but then something shifts. That relief eventually turns into emptiness. The silence they once craved starts to feel isolating. The absence of their partner becomes more noticeable. And because avoidants struggle to recognize and process their emotions, they don't fully understand why they're feeling this way. They don't recognize it as a need for connection. They just feel unsettled, like something is missing. At this stage, their mind starts focusing on the good parts of the relationship. They remember the warmth, the affection, the admiration their ex had for them. They start romanticizing the connection, convincing themselves that maybe they made a mistake by leaving. And because anxious partners are often still emotionally attached, the avoidant knows that reaching out will likely be met with open arms. So they do. But here's the catch. The moment they step back into the relationship, the old fear of engulfment resurfaces. The same closeness they longed for now feels overwhelming again. Their nervous system sounds the alarm, and suddenly they're looking for escape routes. They may start picking fights, focusing on their ex's flaws, or convincing themselves that they are not ready for a relationship. The cycle repeats. The truth is, avoidants don't actually want to be alone forever. They want love, but on their own terms. They want connection, but without feeling trapped. They crave intimacy, but not at the cost of their autonomy. But the problem is, real intimacy requires vulnerability, presence, and emotional openness, things that an avoidant has spent years avoiding. So how does an avoidant break free from this cycle? Awareness is the first step. They need to recognize that their desire for space isn't always about personal freedom. It's often a conditioned fear response. They need to see that their pattern of leaving and returning isn't about finding the right partner, but about their unresolved attachment wounds. The real transformation happens when an avoidant stops running and starts leaning in, when they learn to sit with the discomfort of closeness instead of escaping it, when they start communicating their needs instead of silently withdrawing, when they stop assuming that love means losing themselves and start seeing that true connection enhances freedom, it doesn't take it away. Because real love isn't about independence or dependence. It's about interdependence where both partners can be deeply connected while still maintaining their sense of self. And once an avoidant learns that closeness and freedom can coexist, they stop running back to old patterns and finally start creating the deep, fulfilling love they've been avoiding all along. Avoidants often believe they are making logical decisions when they leave relationships. They convince themselves that something was missing, that their partner was too needy, that they weren't truly happy. They rationalize their withdrawal, telling themselves they need space, freedom, or time to focus on themselves. But what they don't realize is that their brain is tricking them. The mind is designed to protect us. When we experience emotional discomfort, our brain creates justifications to help us escape that discomfort. For an avoidant, closeness triggers a deep-seated fear, whether it's fear of being controlled, fear of losing themselves, or fear of being emotionally overwhelmed. Instead of recognizing this fear for what it is, their brain rewires the narrative to make it seem like leaving is the only logical choice. This happens so seamlessly that they don't even question it. They start fixating on their partner's flaws. Maybe they suddenly find them annoying. Maybe they convince themselves that they need someone more independent. Maybe they tell themselves that they just don't feel that spark anymore. Whatever the excuse, it feels completely rational in the moment. So they leave. And initially, they feel relief. The pressure is gone. They have their space back. Their nervous system calms down because they're no longer experiencing the intensity of emotional closeness. They start focusing on themselves again, feeling free and unburdened. And for a while, they think they made the right choice. But then something shifts. As time passes, their nervous system, which was initially relieved by distance, starts to crave connection again. The brain, once so focused on all the reasons why leaving was the right decision, begins to rewire itself once more. Now, instead of focusing on the negatives, it starts romanticizing the past. The avoidant starts remembering the warmth of their ex's affection. They recall how their partner made them feel important, loved, and admired. They think about the deep emotional connection they shared, and suddenly, it doesn't seem so overwhelming, it seems desirable. Their brain starts to tell a new story. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I let go of something good. Maybe I should go back. This isn't love. It's the brain playing tricks on them again. It's the nervous system trying to find balance, swinging from one extreme, too much closeness, to the other, too much distance. And because the anxious partner is usually still emotionally invested, the avoidant knows that reaching out will likely be welcomed. So they do. They send that I miss you text. They test the waters to see if their ex still wants them. And if the ex responds warmly, they ease back in. At first, it feels great. The connection is strong, the excitement is back, and they feel safe knowing that their ex still cares. But then, like clockwork, the same fears resurface. Their nervous system starts feeling overwhelmed again. The very closeness they missed now feels suffocating. Their brain starts justifying withdrawal all over again. Maybe we're just too different. Maybe I'm not ready for a relationship. Maybe I was right to leave in the first place. And the cycle repeats. This pattern is not a conscious choice. The avoidant truly believes each version of their story when they're experiencing it. When they're pulling away, they genuinely believe leaving is the right decision. When they're longing for connection, they genuinely believe going back is the right decision. They don't realize that their mind is running an old survival script, flipping between seeking safety in distance and seeking safety in connection. The only way to break free is through awareness. An avoidant must learn to recognize when their brain is creating justifications based on fear. They need to question their own narratives. Am I actually unhappy, or am I scared of intimacy? Am I really missing my ex, or am I just craving connection because I've been alone too long? They must start understanding that their emotions are not always accurate indicators of reality. For anxious partners, this awareness is just as crucial. They need to recognize that when an avoidant leaves and comes back, it's not always because they've had a revelation about love. It's often because their nervous system is oscillating between fear of closeness and fear of loneliness. Knowing this allows them to stop personalizing the avoidance behavior and start making empowered choices for themselves. When an avoidant stops believing every story their mind tells them, they can start making real choices, not fear-driven ones. They can learn to sit with emotional discomfort instead of running from it. They can begin to recognize that love isn't about constantly seeking escape or reunion. It's about stability, consistency, and genuine emotional connection. And when they finally break free from this cycle, they can start building the kind of deep, fulfilling relationship they've been avoiding all along. Avoidants often believe they are fully in control of their decisions, that their choices are based on logic, and that when they leave a relationship, it's because it wasn't right for them. But what they don't realize is that their subconscious mind has a very different agenda, one that keeps pulling them back into familiar relationship patterns, even when they think they've moved on. At the core of this pattern is something called unresolved attachment conditioning. This means that the way an avoidant interacts in relationships isn't actually a conscious choice. It's a deeply ingrained survival strategy that was wired into their nervous system long before they even started dating. Their instinct to pull away, to crave space, to rationalize leaving, and then to come back when they start missing their ex. isn't random. It's the result of a subconscious cycle designed to protect them from perceived emotional threats. For many avoidants, emotional closeness triggers an unconscious fear. Maybe in childhood, closeness felt suffocating because they had caregivers who were intrusive, controlling, or emotionally overwhelming. Or maybe love felt inconsistent, unreliable, or conditional, so their nervous system learned that depending on others was dangerous. Over time, they developed a strategy: distance equals safety. This means that when a relationship becomes emotionally intense, their subconscious mind starts sending warning signals, telling them to retreat before they get too close and potentially get hurt. But here's where it gets tricky. Even though avoidants fear too much closeness, they also fear too much distance. It's not that they don't need love, they just don't know how to handle it. When they leave a relationship, they feel relief at first because the pressure is gone, but as time passes, something inside them starts feeling unsettled. Their subconscious mind, which once pushed them to escape, now starts craving connection again. This is why avoidants keep returning to their anxious exes. The familiarity of the relationship provides an emotional safety net. The ex is someone who once admired them, cared for them, and was willing to do whatever it took to keep the connection alive. And because avoidants struggle with deep emotional intimacy, they often choose partners who compensate for that. Anxious partners who willingly overextend themselves, who provide constant reassurance, who are always ready to welcome them back. But as soon as the avoidant re-enters the relationship, their subconscious mind switches gears again. The very thing they longed for, closeness, now starts to feel overwhelming. Their nervous system kicks into high alert, sending messages that they're losing their independence, that their partner is expecting too much, that they need to escape before they become trapped. And so the cycle repeats. What makes this pattern even stronger is that most avoidants don't realize how much their subconscious is running the show. They genuinely believe the thoughts that justify their decisions. When they leave, they tell themselves that the relationship wasn't right. When they come back, they tell themselves they missed their ex. When they leave again, they tell themselves they just weren't ready for commitment. But the truth is, none of these stories are entirely accurate. They're just rationalizations for an emotional cycle that's been playing out beneath the surface. Breaking free from this pattern requires a deep level of self-awareness. An avoidant must start recognizing when their subconscious is driving their actions. They need to question their own impulses. Am I really unhappy, or am I just feeling overwhelmed by closeness? Do I actually want to go back to my ex, or am I just feeling lonely? Is this relationship really the problem, or is it my fear of emotional vulnerability? This kind of introspection isn't easy because it requires facing fears that have been buried for years. It means sitting with discomfort instead of running from it. It means challenging long-held beliefs about independence, relationships, and intimacy. But until an avoidant does this work, they will continue to repeat the same patterns, mistaking their subconscious conditioning for conscious decision-making. For the anxious partner, understanding this cycle is equally important. They must recognize that when an avoidant leaves and comes back, it isn't necessarily because they've changed or because the relationship is meant to be. It's because their subconscious fear of loneliness temporarily overpowers their fear of closeness. Knowing this helps the anxious partner make better decisions about their own emotional well-being, rather than getting caught up in a cycle that ultimately keeps them feeling insecure and unfulfilled. The real breakthrough happens when an avoidant stops letting their subconscious fears dictate their love life, when they stop running, stop rationalizing, and start confronting the root of their patterns, when they learn that love doesn't have to mean losing themselves, that true intimacy doesn't require escape routes. Only then can they break free from the endless cycle of leaving and returning and finally build the kind of deep, meaningful connection they didn't even realize they were craving all along. Avoidants often find themselves caught in a paradox. They crave love, yet fear intimacy. They want connection, but only on their terms. They feel drawn to relationships, but once inside them, they start searching for an escape route. This cycle of avoidance isn't just a personal struggle. It has a profound impact on the people they become involved with, particularly anxious partners. For anxious partners, love means closeness. It means deep emotional connection, frequent reassurance, and a sense of security in knowing the other person is fully present. When they love intensely, often overextending themselves to make the relationship work. They fear abandonment and do whatever they can to keep their partner from pulling away. This makes them highly attuned to any signs of emotional withdrawal which can trigger their deepest insecurities. When an avoidant leaves, the anxious partner experiences profound distress. Their nervous system goes into overdrive, making them feel like something is terribly wrong. They replay conversations in their minds, wondering what they did to push their partner away. They may try to reach out, seeking closure or reconciliation. They may even blame themselves, believing that if they had just been less needy or more understanding, the avoidant wouldn't have left. Then when the avoidant comes back, it triggers a flood of relief. The anxious partner feels like their worst fear, abandonment, has been reversed. It reinforces the belief that if they just wait long enough, if they love hard enough, if they prove themselves worthy, the avoidant will finally stay. This is what makes the cycle so dangerous. It creates a false sense of hope. Avoidants, whether they realize it or not, reinforce this cycle by continuing to leave and return. They don't necessarily do it to be cruel or manipulative. It's simply how their nervous system operates. When they leave, they feel relieved. When they miss the connection, they come back. But the moment things get too close again, their instincts tell them to retreat. This push-pull dynamic creates deep emotional wounds in anxious partners. Over time, they may start to lose trust in love altogether. They may begin to believe that love always has to be painful, that relationships are inherently unstable, that security is something they have to fight for rather than something that should come naturally. Some develop anxious tendencies in future relationships, constantly questioning whether their partner will leave. Others become jaded, adopting avoidant tendencies of their own as a way to protect themselves from ever feeling that pain again. But the emotional cost isn't just on the anxious partner, it affects the avoidant as well. Though they may not outwardly show it, many avoidants struggle internally with their own patterns. Each time they leave someone they care about, there's a small part of them that wonders why they keep running. They may tell themselves they just haven't found the right person yet, but deep down, they know something isn't adding up. Some feel guilt for hurting their partners, even if they don't express it. Others feel an ongoing sense of emptiness, never quite able to fully enjoy their independence because there's always a part of them that longs for connection. Breaking this cycle requires brutal self-honesty. An avoidant must recognize that their tendency to leave and return isn't just about personal preference. It's a deeply ingrained pattern based on unresolved fears. They need to ask themselves why closeness feels threatening, why they struggle to communicate their needs, and why they keep repeating the same behaviors. Instead of avoiding these questions, they need to sit with them, to challenge them, to choose growth over comfort. For anxious partners, the key is recognizing their own self-worth outside of the relationship. They must stop waiting for an avoidant to change, stop believing that love is something they have to chase, and start valuing themselves enough to walk away from unhealthy cycles. Instead of trying to convince someone to stay, they need to focus on their own healing, building a sense of security that isn't dependent on another person's presence. Real love isn't about constant longing and uncertainty or waiting for someone to be ready. It's about mutual respect, emotional safety, and the ability to show up consistently for one another. When both partners can step outside of their conditioned fears and start choosing love with intention rather than from a place of unconscious patterns, that's when true transformation happens. So here's the truth. Avoidance and anxious partners don't just find each other by accident. They are drawn to one another because their attachment styles fit together like puzzle pieces, reinforcing each other's deepest fears and desires. The avoidant fears being consumed by closeness, while the anxious fears abandonment. One pulls away, the other chases. One craves freedom, the other craves connection. And unless this cycle is broken, it can go on for years, keeping both people stuck in patterns that prevent them from experiencing true, healthy love. But there is a way out. Awareness is the first step. Once you see the cycle for what it is, you can no longer be a passive participant in it. Whether you're the avoidant or the anxious partner, you must take radical responsibility for your own emotional patterns. That means recognizing when your fear is driving your decisions, questioning your automatic responses, and learning to sit with discomfort instead of reacting to it. For avoidance, this means facing the reality that closeness is not a threat. It's actually the foundation of deep, meaningful relationships. It means learning to communicate their needs instead of withdrawing, recognizing that their impulse to leave is not always based on truth, and understanding that real love requires consistency, not just occasional moments of longing. For anxious partners, this means reclaiming their power. It means realizing that they do not have to beg for love, that they deserve stability, and that they are worthy of a partner who shows up for them fully, not just when it's convenient. It means breaking the habit of trying to prove their worth through excessive giving, and instead recognizing that they are already enough. Love is not about running, it's not about chasing, it's about choosing to show up, choosing to be aware, choosing to break the cycles that have kept you stuck. Because when you finally step outside of your fears and start making decisions based on growth rather than survival, that's when you open the door to the kind of love that doesn't just come and go. It stays, it deepens, it transforms. Thank you for being here, for being open to this message, and for taking the first step toward greater self-awareness. Whether you see yourself in the avoidant, the anxious, or somewhere in between, know this: you are capable of deep, lasting love. It starts with understanding yourself, breaking free from old patterns, and making the choice to show up for love in a new way. Thank you.